Alexander Reed was a man who lived behind walls higher than any fortress, not just the marble walls of his sprawling mansion that stretched across 10 acres of manicured gardens and silent fountains, but the invisible walls of his own heart, built brick by brick over years of loss, betrayal, and a relentless chase for success that had made him one of the wealthiest men in the country. His name was whispered in boardrooms. His decisions could shift markets. His wealth was estimated in billions. Yet when he stood in his lonely study at midnight with the city skyline twinkling beyond the glass, Alexander knew that none of it mattered because the only person who truly mattered, his wife, Amelia, had been taken from him in an accident that shattered his world and left behind only a little girl named Emily, who at 5 years old had eyes too innocent to carry grief but a heart that craved love, warmth, and laughter that the mansion had long forgotten how to provide. And Alexander, though he adored his daughter in his own way, struggled to show it, for his language had become numbers, deals, and deadlines, not bedtime stories or piggyback rides, and so Emily grew up surrounded by maids who spoke to her formally, tutors who drilled lessons into her mind, and guards who kept her safe but distant, until one summer morning, when Alexander, pressured by his sister Catherine who worried constantly about Emily's isolation, reluctantly agreed to hire a nanny, though he insisted on the best background checks, the cleanest references, and the most professional demeanor, because if someone were to step into his daughter's life, they would have to fit into the sterile, ordered world he had constructed. Yet what arrived at the mansion's gates a week later was not what Alexander had imagined, for Clara Bennett, a young woman of 26, did not walk with the cold precision of a career nanny nor carry the polished airs of someone seeking to please the wealthy. Instead, she had an air of simplicity, her chestnut brown hair tied back in a practical bun, her hazel eyes shining with warmth, and her smile soft but confident as she bent down to Emily's level on their first meeting, speaking to her not as an employer's child but as a friend she genuinely wanted to know. And in that moment something shifted in Emily's world, for she clung to Clara's hand almost instantly, a gesture that startled the house staff who had never seen the little girl so open, and though Alexander watched with his usual mask of indifference, a flicker of curiosity crossed his mind because this woman, this stranger, had managed in seconds what he himself struggled to do every day. Make his daughter laugh, not the polite giggles she offered to please her tutors, but the genuine bubbling laughter of a child who finally felt seen. And while Alexander told himself this was simply part of Clara's job, deep down a seed of discomfort and intrigue was planted, because for the first time, someone was bridging the gap between him and his daughter, and he wasn't sure how he felt about it. The days that followed became a quiet revolution within the mansion, for Clara did not just supervise Emily, she transformed her days into adventures, turning the vast gardens into kingdoms of imagination, the grand library into treasure troves of fairy tales, and the echoing halls into stages of laughter and song. And though the staff at first frowned at Clara's unorthodox ways, soon they too softened, because her presence seemed to awaken corners of the mansion that had long been asleep. Yet the one person who resisted acknowledging it was Alexander, who convinced himself he was too busy, too focused, too hardened to indulge in what he saw as frivolous distractions, until one evening, when he returned home earlier than expected from a grueling board meeting and paused outside Emily's playroom, drawn by the sound of music, a faint melody from an old radio. And as he pushed the door open just a crack, the sight that met his eyes was one that froze him where he stood, for there was Clara, twirling gently across the room with Emily in her arms, the little girl in a pink dress giggling uncontrollably as her nanny spun her around, their laughter filling the air like chimes in the wind. And it was not a rehearsed performance, not something staged to impress, but a pure, unfiltered moment of joy that Alexander had not witnessed in his home since Amelia's death. And in that instant, though he stood silently, unseen, leaning against the heavy oak doorframe, Alexander felt something inside him stir, something long buried beneath years of ambition and grief, and he did not know whether to welcome it or fear it, but he knew one thing for certain: the image of Clara dancing with his daughter would not leave his mind easily, and it was the beginning of a story that would change everything.